The Industrial Revolution. The era known as the Industrial Revolution was a period in which fundamental changes occurred in agriculture, textile, metal manufacture, transportation, economic policies, and the social structure in England. This period is appropriately labeled revolution for it thoroughly destroyed the old manner of doing things, yet the term is simultaneously inappropriate, for it connotes abrupt change. Changes that occurred during this period, 1760 to 1850, in fact occurred gradually.
One of these changes is the advancement in agriculture. Agriculture occupied a prominent position in the English way of life of this period. Not only was its importance rooted in the subsistence of the population, but agriculture was an indispensable source of raw materials for the textile industry. Wool and cotton production for the manufacture of cloth increased in each successive year, as did the yield of food crops. Advances in agriculture included the use of sturdier farm implements fashioned from metal. Up until this period, most farming implements were made entirely of wood. We do not find much technical innovation beyond the slight improvements made on existing implements. We do find increased energy being placed into the breeding of livestock, the control of insects, improved irrigation systems, and the farming methods developing new crops and the use of horsepower in the fields to replace oxen as a source of power. These are just some of the agricultural advancements made during this time period. Now let's get an introduction to the Industrial Revolution and why it had been introduced by Mr. Carriage.
My second question is how the Industrial Revolution came to America from England and how it all started over here, moving on the basis of England.
Well, really, all of you have had the opportunity to learn this now. Essentially, we know about the American dream. The American dream and people's dreams of pursuing God, gold, and glory would lead to a democracy growing. It would lead to a democracy being establishment of a government by the people, for the people, of the people. It would lead to a lot of cultural conflict as well, because as that democracy grew, people pursued dreams and people didn't have access to that dreams, as you all knew. And as the United States expanded its influence within its own borders and ashore, it would lead to, as you pointed to, an economic revolution of all types of sorts, from an agricultural society to an industrial society to what we're seeing now in the information age, as we are in the middle of another big transformation regarding how our economic world is shaped. But in the end, it really truly boils down to back to that first unit you all got to learn about, and that was the American dream. It's about people's pursuit of happiness and having that inalienable right to life, liberty, and pursuing what is going to be their American dream. And that's how this whole country got started. Even though there were many conflicts along the way, it still remains the greatest country in the world as people continue to have the opportunity to pursue that dream and deal with everything that comes along with it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Another advancement was in the textile. Prior to 1760, the manufacture of textiles occurred in the homes by people who gave part of their time to it. It was a tedious process from raw material to finished product. In the case of wool and cloth, the wool had to be sorted, cleaned, and dyed. Then the wool was carded and combed. Next, it was spun into thread, which was woven into cloth. Subsequent processes were performed upon the cloth to change the texture or the color of the woolen cloth. Many of these stages of production were performed by women and children. The supply of raw material for the woolen industry was obtained domestically. The organization of the textile industry was complicated and grossly inefficient before the age of mechanization. Changes in the textile industry were already occurring in the early 1700s. However, these changes were not easily accepted, as evidenced by the workers' riots which broke out in response to the new machines. John Kay Flying Shuttle, which enabled one weaver to do the work of two, and Lewis Paul's roller spinner, which was to make spinning more efficient, later to be perfected by Richard Arkwright, were the precursors of the inventive spirit and the application of new technology to the textile industry. One of the most important advances in the Industrial Revolution was probably transportation. As an integral part of determining the cost and availability of manufactured products, and as a means of improved communications, and as an industry unto itself, the improvement of transportation simulated the course of Industrial Revolution. Finished products, raw materials, food, and people needed a reliable, quicker, and less costly system of transportation. Canals and rivers had long been used as a means of internal transportation. In the mid-1700s began the first construction of canals between industrial districts. The construction of trunk lines opened the central industrial districts in the 1700s. The major thrust of financial backing came from the merchants and industrialists, who had a great stake in their construction. The problem of moving bulk goods overland was addressed, at least for the time being, by canals. However, their days were numbered. but the coming of the railroads was imminent. Principles of rail transport were already in use in the late 1700s. Tramways using cast iron rails were being employed in a number of mines in England. By 1800, more than 200 miles of tramways served coal mines. It is not surprising then to find a number of engineers connected with coal mines searching for a way to supply the steam engine to railways.
And at last, it comes down to the human aspect.
In the 18th century, the population grew at a faster rate than ever before. There are four primary reasons which may be cited for this growth: a decline in the death rate, an increase in the birth rate, virtual elimination of the dreaded plagues, and an increase in the availability of food.
The latter is probably the most significant of these reasons, for English people were consuming a much healthier diet.
One can find a myriad of reasons for the growth of the population. In addition to those above, industry provided higher wages to individuals than was being offered in the villages. This allowed young people to marry earlier in life and to produce children earlier. The old system of apprenticeship did not allow an apprentice to marry. City life provided young people with a greater choice of prospective partners, in contrast to the limited choices in some isolated villages. Finally, industry provided people with improved clothing and housing, though it took a long time for housing conditions to improve. Now let's get a final look at how the Industrial Revolution affected the United States of America. Once again told by Mr. Carriage.
Mr. Karras, would you please tell me how the Industrial Revolution affected America's growth and basically how it affected America in a whole?
Well, when you talk about the Industrial Revolution, you're talking about the transference of a society. So going from an agricultural society where people predominantly relied upon farming, and it was our major industrial sector within the United States. It was what our economy revolved around. When the Industrial Revolution occurred, we're talking about a whole new way of doing things, whether you elevate the Bessemer process, which I'm sure that you learned about, or, when we start seeing cities pop up, we start just seeing manufacturing jobs come to the forefront in the United States, essentially creating a whole new world pertaining to production. And it created different jobs, it created different employment opportunities, and it changed the way people lived to the consumer products in which they bought. So essentially, it changed society.
Thanks for watching.